Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of Dark Echoes. I'm your host, The Dark Suit, and in this installment we'll be visiting the historic old Montana Territorial Prison, which operated from 1871 until 1979, when the last inmate was moved to the new facility a short distance away. Now, lock the doors, close the blinds, turn off the lights and get ready for Dark Echoes. During its 1866 to 1867 winter session, Montana's territorial legislature requested funds for a prison from the United States Congress. It was agreed that the territory was in need of a prison. Congress approved no more than $40,000 in funds, and Deer Lodge was chosen as the site of the territory's first prison. They soon realized the funding was inadequate, causing many delays and revisions to be made. Finally, in the spring of 1870, a convict labor force began construction on the prison, and on July 2, 1871 the first prisoner was received. The prison had problems from the beginning, and due to being inadequate and overcrowded, there was constant construction at the prison for the next 50 years. When Montana became a state on November 8, 1889, the prison became Montana's responsibility. Finding it too expensive to operate, the Board of Prison Commissioners contracted out the entire prison operation in 1890. Colonel Thomas McTague and Frank Conley of Deer Lodge received the contract, which paid them 70 cents per prisoner per day. It wasn't until Frank Conley became warden in 1890 that things at the prison finally started to turn around. Conley instituted extensive inmate labor projects that kept inmates at work, constructing the prison buildings and walls, as well as providing various state and community services like building roads, logging, and ranching. On March 8, 1908, two inmates, George Rock and William Hayes, who were cellmates, attempted to escape with the help of two other inmates, Orem Stevens and C.B. Young. Rock was serving 99 years for the murder of Ed Curl, while Hayes was serving 10 years for robbing a saloon. At 8:15 in the morning the four convicts entered the administration office. Conley heard a commotion coming from the holding room, but before he could go see what was going on, Hayes entered the room and jumped the railing that separated the prisoners from the warden's desk. Hayes approached the warden, placed a firm hand on his shoulder and said, "I want to get out of here." Warden Conley smirked and replied, "Over my dead body," to which Hayes replied by flashing a knife and threatening to cut Conley's head off. Conley quickly grabbed his revolver and shot Hayes in the head. Hayes fell to the floor but wasn't seriously hurt. He got up and lunged at the warden, slicing the warden Conley from his ear to his collarbone, narrowly missing Conley's jugular vein. The warden then took two more shots at Hayes as he continued to slash with the knife. As Hayes fell to the floor as the bullets tore through him, he managed to slice Conley's leg. In the holding room, George Rock and Deputy Warden John Robinson were also fighting. Sadly though, Deputy Warden Robinson wasn't as successful as Conley in fending off his attacker. Robinson reportedly stumbled into the office covered in blood and said, "My God, Frank, they've got me," as Rock entered the room behind him. Conley yelled for his friend Robinson to get down, and shot at Rock. At this point, Hayes, after being shot 3 times, gets off the floor again and continues to cut and slash at the warden. Conley tried one last time to shoot Hayes, however, he realized he was out of ammunition. He then mustered up what was left of his strength, picked Hayes up and threw him into the hallway, then grabbed the prisoner's weapon and went back into his office to help Robinson. Rock was stabbing Robinson wildly as Conley picked up a chair and smashed it over the inmate's head, knocking him to the ground. Sadly, Deputy Warden Robinson had been fatally stabbed. Rock then got up and began slashing at Warden Conley just as Hayes had done. The struggle continued as Conley took his empty revolver and began to pistol whip Rock in the head with it. A moment before, a prisoner who was working in the area heard the noise in the next room and ran to tell the nearest guards. When the guards arrived, the door to the office was locked. Throwing their weight against it, they were able to break the door down. The scene was gruesome. In the corner lay Deputy Warden John Robinson, dead, in a pool of blood, hacked and stabbed to death. Warden Frank Conley was on top of George Rock, still beating him over the head with the butt of his revolver, after receiving over 50 stab wounds. The guards quickly grabbed the warden and dragged him to safety, beating Rock unconscious with their billy clubs. The warden was taken to the hospital and treated for his stab wounds. Rock and Hayes were taken to the infirmary to recover from the warden's bullets. Rock recovered quickly, and on April 9, 1908 he pled guilty and asked that he be given the death penalty and a fast execution. He got his wish for the death sentence, but he would have to wait over 2 months before his execution. Hayes appealed his case, arguing that he wasn't given a fair trial and was improperly charged for the murder of Deputy Warden Robinson. A month later, the Court of Appeals affirmed the original decision and Hayes was set to hang on April 1, 1909. On June 15, 1908, more than 200 people entered the prison to watch George Rock swing from the gallows. At 12:30 in the morning, reporters were allowed to enter Rock's cell for his final interview. He didn't say much other than, he was glad that he survived the attack that led to his execution. He said, "I have since made my peace with God, and I am ready to go, knowing full well that I deserve my fate." At 1:30 in the morning, to the gallows at the northern edge of the prison yard. Rock never looked up as he walked across the platform to the noose. Sheriff Pfeiffer asked if Rock had any last words. "Nothing," he said, his voice and body trembling. The sheriff placed the black hood over the condemned man's head and stepped back. Seconds later, the 300-pound weight was released and Rock's body flew into the air. The noose had failed to tighten around his neck, so it wasn't broken as it should have been. Witnesses reported that they could see the man breathing and his body convulsing violently. Doctors checked for a pulse and found Rock's heart still beating steadily, as he was left to slowly strangle to death. On April 1, 1909, just over a year after Rock's horrific hanging, it was now time for William Hayes to meet a similar fate. Again, the man's neck was not broken and he strangled on the end of the rope. His body swung and twisted as he grabbed at his neck, gasping for air, and desperately trying to grab the rope above him to pull himself up. He died slowly and agonizingly. As for Stevens and Young, the 2 other inmates implicated in the escape attempt, both got cold feet at the start of the conflict and ran, throwing their knives away and hiding in their cells. Young, who was serving 10 years, received a new life sentence for his role in the attacks, while Stevens, who really had no role in the attack, had his good behavior time revoked. Don't miss the next episode of Dark Echoes, where we will be talking about the 1959 Montana State Prison riot. If you enjoyed this episode, you definitely won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching Dark Echoes. As always, don't forget to give a thumbs up, leave a comment and subscribe if you haven't already.